Marquise Brown had one of the more interesting seasons last year out of rookie players where, he bursted onto the scene right away, where in that blowout against Miami, he had 4 catches for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns. So, definitely very good in that first game. But since then, he kind of dropped off to some degree. He ended the season with just 584 yards, so definitely a drop off. He had a couple of nice games along the stretch. He had a couple games where he had over 80 yards, but he never really matched that throughout the rest of the season up until the playoff game where he once again actually had a career high 7 receptions and 126 receiving yards. The receiving yards wasn't career high, but the receptions was. So I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, this is a guy who pretty much was sort of not a major player throughout the entire season, except for week 1 and the last game he played, the playoff game against Tennessee. So what happened there? I want to get into it. So first, we'll have to take there's three parts here. What went right against Miami? What not necessarily went wrong, but why did he not have as much success against other teams? But then why did he once again have a ton of success against the Titans? Also, I misspoke. It wasn't a career high. He had 8 catches in week 2, but then 7 was the second most. So little correction there in real time. But anyways, we'll start things off with this play. It's going to be a cover 1 play. It's a cover 1 hole, so man coverage. And it's going to be play action, and Brown is running a route right over there. So you might be thinking, okay, typically this type of play works better against zone coverage, right? Because it gets players to move in, and you can throw it over the top of them. But with man coverage, even if it is play action, the guy in charge of covering Brown is going to make sure he's covering Brown no matter what. So, there is that factor to it. But what's interesting here is the reason why this is going to work out is because of how far the play action is going to be towards the sideline on the bottom of the screen. They're going to really fake as though they're running in that direction. So this is actually going to move some of those Miami players that are designed to cover the middle of the field further over to the, away from Brown, giving Brown more opportunity to get open. So Brown really just has to win his own one-on-one matchup, which he does. He's got some separation here on a slant route. A slant route's a pretty easy route to get some separation on if the middle of the field has been cleared out, which it has. So it's not the highest degree of difficulty play, but hey, he's still doing his part. He's open. I mean, you can even look one step further. Look at the receiver just past Brown. He's even more open, but Lamar wants to hit Brown because he's closer to the middle of the field, and there's less people in that area who could make a tackle once he gets the ball. And since those 2 Miami players totally bit on this play action, Lamar's easily able to hit Brown, and since another Miami player went for the ball and missed, it leads to a pretty easy touchdown. So that's part of how they were able to have success, was just that play right there, which I think a lot of people might say, well, that's more bad by Miami than good by Brown and good by the Ravens. And I would say that. I would say that that is definitely something that's true, which is, that's actually part of why he was able to have such a good game, is because of how bad Miami played against him. This next play is another example where it's going to be a cover 2 zone, and that's going to be his route. So a deep route, this is kind of the thing where since it's a zone coverage like this, he'll run deep. It kind of turns into a one-on-one matchup in that area. But if he can win his one-on-one matchup, this could work out pretty well. However, what you're going to notice is that the Miami player who's in charge of covering deep is not going to stay very far deep. I mean, look at how far in he's going to be. This ball was snapped at about the 17-yard line, so he's only about 10 yards further deep than the line of scrimmage, which is just not deep enough, because for Brown, what he's going to do now is just make one move closer to the inside, and since he has so much speed, he's able to get wide open. So again, great job by Brown for sure. He has the speed to get open like that, and even made a move to get a touchdown. But at the same time, this is kind of why sometimes bulk stats can be misleading. You make one good play and that results for an 80+ yard touchdown, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're as talented as someone who maybe had to work to get a bunch of 15-yard gains because the defense was playing good against them. So, you can't just look at stats in a vacuum. But that being said, still a very good game. I'm not trying to take away from what he did, but there was definitely some luck involved as well. I think we can all agree on that. But as I said, you definitely saw his yards per game drop off a bit, I mean, there was one 2-week stretch where his combined yards per game totals was -1. So, he was hit or miss for the most part. Again, like I said, he had 86 yards in week 2. He had 80 yards in week 10. So he definitely had some moments, and also, he was banged up for a part of the season as well. So that factors in as well. But still, I mean, I think it's a fair thing to say, well, what exactly happened in the middle of the stretch there? And a lot of it was certain like plays like this where it's a one-on-one matchup, and that's the route he's running. So there is also a Kansas City safety who is deep as well, but he's actually going to take away a different route. I mean, as you see, once the ball is snapped, it's play action, and you notice that safety, he's going to run over to take away the route over the middle. But also, if you notice Brown right here, what the Kansas City player that's going up against him is doing is just creating some contact, which is something you would definitely see players do a lot. It was clearly in the game plan to create some contact against Marquise Brown. I mean, he's listed at 5'9", 170 pounds. That's not a big guy. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised to see him, be like 185 and 190 next year. I think he has to bulk up. 170 is not a lot for a football player at all. I mean, that's skinny for a punter. I mean, you can't really it's tough to play wide receiver at that weight, and as you see why, because it takes him so much longer to get to his route. There really isn't much separation. Also, the Kansas City safety did get back to try to get into that play as well. Lamar threw it there because he saw the safety going and covering the other player, but Brown just wasn't able to get open enough, which largely was due to the fact that he was not that big. He's not that strong on the line, so him getting off on the line is definitely something he has to work on. And, he can use his footwork, he can use his speed all he wants, but at the end of the day, he's going to get pushed around. Even if he does gain 15 pounds, 20 pounds, he's going to get pushed around because he's a smaller guy. That's just part of, what he's working with. I also do feel like this probably isn't the best system for Brown to play in. A lot of people talked about pre-draft, or once they drafted him, well, does this make a ton of sense? Will he be able to fit this Lamar Jackson RPO style offense? And I was saying, oh yeah, he totally will. But I was a little bit wrong. There have been some problems. I think that he would be better suited in a different system. That's not to say that he can't still be effective in this one, but, he'd probably be better playing for the Saints than for the Ravens. I mean, most people would, but this is an example of what I'm talking about. Most people would, as in most people would play well for the Saints. Not most people would play better there than with the Ravens. Anyways, this play, it's going to be it's one-on-one matchup. Brown is running a deep route. And, Brown's going to do a pretty good job in this route. He doesn't allow any contact at the line. He's going to run deep, and he's going to create some separation. There is a window there, but Lamar's just not going to be able to fit it through there. There was also some contact, maybe that factored in as well. But either way, it was not, that one wasn't going to be, Lamar, it looked a little bit worse because Brown fell down right there. It looks like their feet got tangled, but it was a bit too far anyways. And I think that's kind of this is one example. He did this, there was 5 times in the Kansas City Chiefs game that they threw deep to Brown, and they connected on one of them. So, listen, that matters. I mean, being able to 1 out of 5, you'll kind of take that if it means a touchdown. But at the same time, if he's getting somewhat open consistently, you would ideally like to be able to make a couple of those. Lamar Jackson, I think he's fantastic. Listen, I said the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl next year. I really like Lamar Jackson. We all know that accurately throwing the ball downfield consistently isn't his best strong suit. That's not what makes him great. What makes him great is his running ability and the fact that he can do that from time to time. He's not terrible at it. He's just not excellent at it. And if Brown was playing for the Chiefs, he'd probably get more of those completions. But at the end of the day, that's not what he's doing. So that's just a couple of reasons why he sort of didn't have as many yards in that game as in those games as he did in week 1 or in the final week of the season. But then you might be wondering, okay, well, what happened the final week of the season then, or their final week, the playoff game? And part of it was just that Lamar Jackson was throwing the ball a lot more, so that just means more opportunities. But also part of it was, I do feel like throughout the season, Brown had kind of learned a second move in a lot of ways. He sort of was starting to realize, okay, I can't just be a speed guy. I have to, I can't just run slant routes and go routes. I have to be able to do other things. It's like this play, for example. What's going to happen is that, so it's going to be a cover 2 man that they're going up against. And for Baltimore, the 2 receivers on the bottom of the screen will be running those 2 routes. So, Brown's route, that's the important route here. He's the one that's closest to the bottom of the screen. He's the one who's going to be cutting back towards the middle, not the one who's just running straight. And so this is an important route. It's cover 2 man, so the idea is that one receiver runs deep. He's going to push that safety deep. Now you have Brown cut underneath him. It's going to be a one-on-one matchup. Obviously, it's man coverage, so there still will be a tight end in the area. But if Brown can win that matchup, he can get open and he can potentially make a play. And this is key because what Brown can do, and this is something I actually talked about before he was drafted. I remember talking about this could be a way that he could set up other routes, is, his speed. You look at how he runs this beginning portion of the route, and look where that tight end player is in comparison to him. He's much further deep and closer to the sideline, which is interesting. Typically, people will tell you, use the sideline as an extra defender. If it's basically force them to have to try to get a toe tap play in there, you're okay with that as a defensive back most of the time. But he's still playing closer to the sideline and further deep because he's afraid of getting burned deep in that direction, which now means that because of that, Brown can quickly cut, and he did a pretty good cut on that one too, and he's able to get the completion to the 20-yard line. It's a route like that would give me confidence as a Baltimore Ravens fan that this guy is going to get better and better every year, because this is not what he was doing preseason. This is not what he was doing in the first couple games of the season. It's not what he was doing against Miami. Even though he had more yards in that game against Miami, as I showed, a lot of that was just a couple of chunk plays where really defenders just screwed up. A lot was made of this bad playoff loss, and I get it, but probably the most optimistic thing about it was how well Brown played. I mean, this is another example where it's going to be a cover 1 here. So a little interesting that Tennessee is actually going with only a single safety deep in this situation, because it's a 3rd down and 13 right here. There's only 18 seconds left in the half. So them not being able to, Baltimore has 1 timeout. So you figure Baltimore is going to try to take a shot here. So if I'm Tennessee, I am not running this play, but it's what they decided to do. So, okay. And for Baltimore, what they're going to do is they're going to have 3 receivers run deep routes. They are taking a shot deep. And Brown's route is the second route. Brown's route's the one in the middle right here. So this is interesting. There's a player running closer to the middle. He's going to take away the safety. But, there's not a lot of separation in between Brown and another receiver. So there's not a ton of separation down towards the bottom of the field. However, take a look at what happens right when this ball is snapped. And I mean literally I barely played it at all. What you see here is that the defensive back, he's going to turn his hips sort of, to one direction. His hips are now pointed towards the top of the screen. So Brown is going to notice this, and he's going to say, okay, well, I should run in the other direction then, because doing that now basically means that he's going to have to turn his head back, and he won't be able to look at the ball, which is going to be very key, because then throughout the rest of this route, there's not a ton of separation, but Brown can see the ball, whereas the defensive back can't, and he's able to make that catch and get inside the 5-yard line. It's really a tremendous play, a really well-ran route, and a smart route too. So, he's a young player, but he's getting smarter, he's getting better, and I think that the sky is really the limit for him, would he probably get more yards if he was in a different system? Yeah, he'd probably have better bulk stats, but at the end of the day, he's such an important tool in this Ravens toolbox, because they need someone like him, I think, for, everyone always talks about, well, this isn't an offense that can play from behind, but you know what? If they have him, he can be someone who, if they're down 4 points in the fourth quarter, he can go out and he can, run a deep route and run well. And, even in a traditional passing offense, they can be successful. And I don't totally agree that they can't play from behind. I think people are just using a small sample size to say that. At the end of the day, I mean, unless you're down 28-3 in the fourth quarter, then you're going to have to pass it a lot more. But typically, even if you're down, you can still run the ball. So that's kind of an overhyped saying anyways. So, well, yes, there maybe is a downside. I think it's overhyped. So yeah, I mean, as a whole, I really like Brown. I think Brown's going to be very good. And he's already shown flashes of being great, so why can't he be great full time? So that's just my opinion. What do you guys think about Brown and his rookie performance? I thought he played very well. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.